For several occasions now, we've been discussing themes that you find in the first few chapters of the book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament. Jeremiah the prophet that is classified by historians and scholars as the weeping prophet. He lived through the demise and destruction of that southern kingdom of Judah. For decades, he's tried to call the people back to what they used to be and recognize the truth that they have actually abandoned. Chapter 9 is no different, and chapter 9 is a chapter I really want to discuss for the few moments we have together on this occasion. I really want to ask a question. What happens to a culture that totally obliterates and removes integrity from the way that they think, from what they say, from the way that they live? Because that's exactly what's taken place in the southern kingdom of Judah. And once again, if you take the message of Jeremiah in these opening chapters out of that setting in the 600s BC and change to phrases that would be used in our culture rather than the Hebrew culture of that day, what he's been writing so far sounds like it could have been written about things that are happening in the 21st century and the way people have abandoned truth and what is right and have gravitated towards what is undoubtedly wrong. What happens if you remove integrity? The statement that's made at the very beginning of this, actually in verse number 2, concerning the kingdom of Judah, they are all adulterers, an assembly of treacherous men. That's a harsh thing to say about any culture. Why is that the case? Because from what is stated in verse 3, their foundation is not truth. Their foundation is not what is right. Their foundation is based on lies and evil. Here's the statement. They are not valiant for the truth on the earth, for they proceed from evil to evil, and they do not know me, says the Lord. There's the foundation for their actions. There's the foundation for the way that they think. Truth, now as far as fact is concerned, fact is whatever they determine fact to be. Sound familiar? In verse number 4, they do not trust each other. Everyone take heed to the neighbor and do not trust any brother. I'm not going to trust anybody. But why would that be the case? Because I know that nobody can trust me, is exactly the statement that is made. That's the impact of what Jeremiah says. You're living in a culture where nobody can trust each other at all because all of you have given up on the idea of what is right versus what is wrong and what is true versus what is false. In the latter part of verse number 4, every brother will utterly supplant and every neighbor will walk with slanderers. The idea of supplant means I'm going to take the place of. So I want to remove you from your position of influence because I want to be where you are. And how do I determine that? How do I accomplish that? Not with truth, not with what is right. I'm going to slander you every way possible. Every neighbor will walk with slanderers. There's no concern for truth, no concern for what is right or what is wrong. I will determine what that would be. No wonder the southern kingdom of Judah ultimately succumbs to the might and the power of the Babylonian Empire. In verse number 5, everyone will deceive his neighbor and will not speak the truth. Well, deception goes hand in hand with everything that is mentioned so far. That's exactly what's involved. Again, is this starting to sound familiar? In verse number 6, through deceit they refuse to know me, says the Lord. That deception is something that runs the gambit of every area of their life. But there's an interesting statement that's made in the end of verse number 5. They weary themselves to commit iniquity. They use their energy not for anything productive. They use their energy to destroy anything and everyone in their path so that they can have power over others. So while this infighting is taking place in the kingdom of Judah, while the people are bent on things that are false, while they are slandering each other, while neighbor is working against neighbor and brother against brother, they seem oblivious to the fact that the Babylonian Empire is gaining strength. And God ultimately uses the Babylonian Empire to conquer a nation that has become void of anything that is good. And that's sad. Again, I've stated it before, but it bears repeating. This nation needs to wake up. As you continue into chapter 9, the statement is made in verse 8. One speaks peaceably to his neighbor with his mouth, but in his heart he lies in wait. I'm just waiting for a chance to obliterate those around me. I'll speak in pleasantries, but I don't have pleasantries in my heart. Ill will, that's what I thrive upon. In fact, all of my energy, I weary myself in committing iniquity. All of my energy and focus is doing something to advance me and ruin everybody else in the process. There's something that is written about 350 years or so before this statement in Jeremiah that you find from the pen of David. The time he writes this, he is not king. Actually, he's been serving the court of Saul. King Saul wants David dead and is chasing him to take away his life. David writes some interesting things in Psalm chapter 52. Why do you boast in evil, O mighty man? The goodness of God endures continually. Your tongue devises destruction like a sharp razor working deceitfully. You love evil more than good, lying rather than speaking righteousness. You love all devouring words, your deceiving tongue. Interesting statement. History repeats itself over and over again, usually not for the better. So over 3 centuries after this statement from David talking about individuals that had that kind of heart, those kind of blemishes, those kind of infirmities in the way that they were thinking and the way that they were living, you find those same kind of deficiencies in the life of those in the southern kingdom of Judah that God deplores and with which Jeremiah pleads, please change before it's too late. History repeats itself. Again, usually not for the better. At the very end of this chapter in Jeremiah, chapter 9, not exactly the last few verses, but close to the end. In verse 23, thus says the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, let not the mighty man glory in his might, nor let the rich man glory in his riches. With the mindset of our culture is that, well, if you take away wisdom and take away power and take away wealth, what's left? For most people, the concept is, well, that's everything, because that's all that they clamor for. Look around, and you see people vying for any of those 3, or a combination of all of them, and it doesn't matter who they step on or destroy in the process of acquiring those things for themselves. The statement is, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom. Do not let the mighty man glory in his might, his strength. Do not let the rich man glory in his riches. Because those things ultimately don't last. What's the answer? Verse 24. Let him who glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord, exercising loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these I delight, says the Lord. Now those that are antagonistic towards the concept of God say, well, God's not a loving God. Look at what he's done. Listen to all 3 of these: loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness. If people are bent on self-destruction, is it loving for me to not try to correct them? If people are committing crimes, is it loving for me to turn my back on the victims and not really for justice to be done? People are clamoring for justice today, and yet they decry God actually being just against those who have been so abominable in the way they have treated others, even within their own culture. God says loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness are things in which he delights. Unfortunately, to a large degree, those 3 things are a rare commodity in our culture. We need to get back to something that really matters. No matter how much people want that selfish kind of fulfillment, selfishness is a formula ultimately for self-destruction. Chapter 9 of Jeremiah. Again, sounds like items that you could see on the evening news or read on the evening paper or website in our day. Please keep reading Jeremiah and notice how people have not changed. Unfortunately, many are bent on the same self-destructiveness as the people in the southern kingdom of Judah over 2,500 years ago. Please stay safe. We'll talk again soon.